Hello, folks. Dustin Zarni here, Democratic Elections Commissioner for Onondaga County. Today is Tuesday, February 17th, and welcome to Commissioner in the Car, the Conventions and Designations edition. I'm coming to you a couple of days late. I usually do these on Sundays, but last week I went to Albany on Wednesday for my for my annual budget presentation and testimony, and that really pushed me back several days. It pushed my weekly walk back to Saturday, and then it pushed the holiday was in there, and so here I am on Tuesday doing my commissioner in the car. I did put up my testimony. It's on my DustinZarni.com. It's on my Facebook page, YouTube page, all of that. So check it out. I was up there for about 40 minutes, along with my panel, and my written testimony is on DustinZarni.com as well. So if you're interested in that, you can watch. So that's what's going on there. So here we are. Tuesday, February 17th, 2026, Commissioner in the Car, Conventions and Designations edition. It's 126 days until the June primary, 259 days until the midterm election. Last week at the Board of Elections was a pretty big week for us. It was our party change deadline. As you know, I talked about this in last week's Commissioner in the Car, the Fall in Love with Your Party Day. We were open on Saturday, February 14th, and that was our last day to receive party changes to be eligible to run for office, pass petitions, sign petitions, or of course vote in the primaries in the June election. These are for existing voters. New voters have until 10 days before, and that was our big thing last week. We were also started preparing for the petitions for candidates. Candidates were going for the Democratic designation, and that was on Thursday, and we'll get to that in a second. But so we started preparing the petitions for all the candidates that were designated for the Democratic Party. The Democratic staff did that. Of course, the Republican staff does their own as well, or anybody who's challenging. We do that as well at the Board of Elections. If somebody wants to challenge a race, and they did not get designated, they want to go ahead and have a primary, we will help them prepare a petition. So we do that free of charge for anybody, any voter in Onondaga County. I'll do it for Republicans. I'll do it for Democrats. I'll do it for working families. I'll do it for non-enrolls that want to do it when we get to the nominating petitions later on. It's something that I believe in. I believe our office is there to serve all voters. And so whether somebody is an official candidate or not, we will help them get on the ballot and let the voters decide. So that leads me to my purpose of this podcast, and that's the state and county conventions, or what we're calling conventions and designations. So we'll start with state conventions. So we have 3 offices that are running for statewide offices, and because those offices go over many different counties, all 62 counties in New York State, we allow the parties direct ballot access, which means they don't have to pass petitions throughout every corner of the state to get on the ballot if they're a recognized party. And the 4 recognized parties are the Democrats, the Conservative, the Working Families, and the Republicans. And all 4 will have a statewide convention. All 4, I believe, already have. I'm going to talk about the Democrats and Republicans for this podcast, but for the most part, the Conservatives and Working Families, they tend to designate the same people as the Conservatives designate the Republicans statewide, and the Working Families designate the Democrats statewide, with one slight exception, and we'll go into that in a little bit. But the state conventions have already happened. The Democrats held theirs on February 4th through the 6th in Syracuse, by the way. And then the Republicans held theirs on February 10th through the 12th on Long Island. When the nominations for state candidates were for governor, Democrats nominated Governor Hochul for governor, and her lieutenant governor choice, former New York City Council Speaker Adrian Adams. Sorry about that. The GOP for governor nominated Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, and for lieutenant governor, after a couple of at first Bruce Blakeman nominated Fulton County Sheriff, but he turned him down the next day. And so that day he turned to Oneida County Sheriff Todd Hood. So that was an interesting development. Comptroller, the Democrats nominated Tom DiNapoli, and the GOP nominated, Tom DiNapoli's the incumbent. GOP nominated investor Joseph Hernandez. And for Attorney General, the Democrats nominated Letitia James, and the GOP, who was the current incumbent Attorney General, and the GOP nominated, I'm hoping I'm not going to get this wrong, apologies if I do, Sarita Kumatareddy, who's a former U.S. attorney and Trump administration official. So those were the nominees. Now you may say, well, what about senator? Well, senator runs on a 6-year term, and we only have 2 senators. So that means that every third cycle, neither senator is up. And this is one of them. The previous 2 years ago was Kristen Gillibrand ran for re-election, and 4 years ago, Chuck Schumer ran for re-election. So in 24 and 22, now in 26, there is no nominee for senator because there's no Senate up. So that's what's happening there. That's why there's no Senate. Now, I did say that they have automatic ballot access, and that's not just the winners, by the way. If there was a second place person that got over 25% of the delegation vote, they would also get ballot access. But in neither party did anybody get over 25%. In fact, the one who got closest was current Lieutenant Governor Anthony Delgado for the Democrats, and he got about 16%. And now, just because you don't get the 25% at the state party doesn't mean you can't run a primary. You can. You have to circulate 15,000 signatures statewide to get on the ballot. Anthony Delgado announced shortly after the convention that he would not be seeking the signature process. He's ending his campaign and allowing Governor Hochul to have the Democratic line. There are 2 people that I know of at this point that have announced that they are running a signature campaign to get their nomination for statewide office. So we still may have a statewide primary. That is Larry Sharp, who's the former Libertarian candidate for governor, switched his party to the Republican Party, and is saying that he's going to get 15,000 signatures statewide. And then there's also Drew Rorshaw, who is a housing executive, who says he's running against Tom DiNapoli. He only got like 11% of the committee vote, but he says he's running and getting 15,000 signatures. We'll find out on April 6th whether either one of them got enough. And then, of course, challenges after that. So we may not know whether there's a primary statewide for either party until middle of April, because the petition period starts next week, which is what we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks for the Commissioner and Nagar. So, the petition period starts February 24th, and it runs until April 2nd, but you have until April 6th to file your petitions And if you're running statewide, you got to do it with the state board. Now, that sums up state conventions. Now we have, and there is no direct ballot, although we are trying to get that. That is a bill that the Democratic Rural Conference, the Republican Elections Commissioners, and the Democratic Elections Commissioners are pushing to make our local counties have the same ballot access as our state boards or state parties. That would eliminate a lot of the petitioning that we do and give candidates a proper place on the ballot. But that being said, that's not what the law is now. And so these county designations are very important, even if you don't get ballot access, because it provides about hundreds of volunteers that are on the county party committees that will pass those petitions for those parties. And so the Republicans met on February 7th and nominated designated their candidates, and the Democrats met on February 12th and designated their candidates. Now, these are candidates for county legislature, so there's 17 of them. Democrats nominated or designated candidates in all 17, and the Republicans designated candidates in 16 of 17 races. The County Led 16, they have not designated a candidate as of the time of this podcast. They also designated candidates in town races. The Republicans did not announce who their town races were. At least it wasn't in the paper. The Democrats have, and they have gone out and put in a full slate. Everybody that they could challenge that are doing petitioning, they are challenging. It's a big, it's a big statement from the Democrats, who don't normally do this. They actually have more candidates at town offices that are earlier this session than normal, because they switched a lot of their towns over to the petition process because of the enthusiasm that they saw last year. And but there are still a lot of towns that are caucuses that won't formally designate their candidates, and those are actually nominations, not designations, because they're voted on by the public. So we'll talk about caucuses at a later date. So these are the designees, and I'm not going to go into the list of all of them because there's hundreds of them. There's a lot of people on the ballot every year. So, there are the highlights, of course, the county ledge. I just talked about county court, our state representatives, both state senates and all 4 assembly districts that touch Onondaga County. They will have races up and down the ballot. Then, of course, Democrats nominated designated candidates in Salina, Manlius, Onondaga, Spafford, and Marcellus. And all of these races are huge races that can determine the makeup of those towns. So it's going to be interesting. So that's what a designation is. Now, it's important to remember that again, challenge candidates can pass petitions as well, and if 2 people turn in valid petitions in the same party in that political subdivision, there will be a primary in June. And so we may have local primaries in June. We've already heard of possibilities of some county ledge primaries. There has been announcements of candidates in OCL 8, OCL 16, OCL 17 OCL 16 on the Democratic side. There's possibility of a Democratic primary in Assembly District 129. So these are the possibilities that are out there. I've heard of possible Republican primaries out there for some of the races as well. So we'll have to see what comes about in mid-April. So that's the next thing that's coming about. But again, the designation does not mean that they have to that you as a party member have to vote for them in the primary. It doesn't mean that they have to accept that. It just means that and it doesn't give them ballot access. Both parties still have to get ballot access. So none of these candidates are official candidates, unlike the state conventions, where those three candidates that are nominated in each of the parties are official candidates. Now, I didn't touch on the conservative in WFP, whether on the county or the state. The only thing I know, on the statewide, I believe the conservatives backed all of the candidates. On the county side, they haven't announced yet. Same with the WFP, except for governor. And that's an interesting thing. We'll see if that changes, because the WFP decided that they were going to be neutral in the governor's race, run a placeholder, and then have that placeholder possibly give the nomination to either Hochul or Delgado, or maybe not at all. It's going to be interesting to see if that changes now that Delgado has dropped out, because one of the ways you stay a recognized party is by getting votes on the governor's line. I think it's going to be around 150,000 votes this year that you have to get. It's a percentage of the party. So we'll talk about that as we get closer to the general election and what that means. But yeah, if they don't get enough votes on the general election, they may not be a recognized party next year. So that is going to be very important to see whether they give that slot to Kathy Hochul or run a splitter candidate, or if they're not going to give it to Delgado because he's decided not to run. So it's an interesting question. Speaking of interesting questions, you know what? Yeah, well, let's go to the trivia question. Last week, my trivia question was, how many towns voted for John Mannion and Kamala Harris in 2024? And I told you the answer would be surprising, and it is, because we have 19 towns in Onondaga, and many people think the towns are these large red blobs that Democrats can't win in, and that has changed. You saw that in my weekly wonks when talking about it, but 13 of the 19 towns voted for both John Mannion and Kamala Harris. Usually, John Mannion outpolled Kamala Harris, but it wasn't always that in every town. And 13 of the 19 towns voted for John Mannion and Kamala Harris. And they are Camillus, Clay, DeWitt, Geddes, Lysander, thought of as a big red town, not so much. Manlius, Marcellus, you saw that in last week's Weekly Wonk. Onondaga, you'll see that in next week's Weekly Wonk. Pompey, Salina, Skinny Atlas, Spafford, and Tully. By the way, I didn't say that we nominated in, because that's a caucus town. Never mind. Ignore that. So next week's question is, how many towns voted for Hochul and Knoll in 2022? Now that's going to be less. And I think we will see that some towns voted for one and not the other. I don't know the answer to this yet because I haven't done the research. I will before next week's Commissioner in a Car. So that'll be next week's trivia question. I did drop my weekly wonk on the town of Marcellus, as I talked about. It was on Saturday. You can find that at dustinsarney.com. On Thursday, I hope on Thursday, I will drop my next weekly wonk on Onondaga. I'm in the middle of that will be part 4 of my 6-part series of towns that are nominating candidates in 2026 on the Democratic side by petitions. So they're about to go out and start walking petitions next week in these towns. Onondaga is one of them. We'll talk about that. And I think you'll be surprised at how well Onondaga has done in recent years and whether they can keep that up this year. And then finally, so that'll be next week. And that's all I got. Next week's Commissioner in the Car on Sunday will be a refutation of the SAVE Act again. So the SAVE Act was passed by the House of Representatives and is pending before the Senate. And I got a lot of calls as that happened. And I did, by the way, do one last year on this when they did it last year as well. And remember, last year it got passed by the House and not by the Senate. That's more than likely the scenario again this year. But we'll go over that next week. I'll talk about why I believe this legislation is flawed, why it's worse than the legislation they passed a year ago, and also why I believe that ultimately passage of this is a long shot. But a lot of you have questions, and I'm here to give you the answers. So tune in next week and next Sunday, not even next week, later this week, and we'll do probably a pretty long Commissioner in the Car on this. So thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Enjoy, or next Sunday. Enjoy your week. Bye-bye.